You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a philosophy podcast by students and graduates. Whether you've never heard of philosophy or have a philosophy PhD, we hope you enjoy these conversations as we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy!
So,
Hey. Shall I open with a quote?
Have you got a quote?
Kabat-Zinn. John Kabat-Zinn.
Yeah, do it.
Shall I open? So his definition of mindfulness, right? So this is from his introduction, his mindfulness for beginners thing. It's paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And so that was his definition, and essentially he was one of the, there was multiple people before him that actually brought mindfulness into the West, and to be honest, it's kind of hard to chase the breadcrumbs all the way back to when mindfulness started to become a thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the difficult thing. That's the thing you really have to do with a lot of these religious ideas. That what's his name? Mahasi Sayadaw. He was one of the other guys. John Kabat-Zinn is one of the first to really bring it, because it's part of a larger context of just bringing loads of Eastern ideas into Britain and America and the rest of the West. Like, during the 60s, there was this massive explosion of these ideas. And, we're still sort of seeing it with things like ninjutsu coming across in, like, TV. Just, like kids' programs and shit, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and shit. And fucking Power Rangers to a lesser extent. But before that, like, the explosion in popularity of, like, Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and stuff. And the Beatles getting into all their shit, all their fucking hippie dippy.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it was sort of around the 60s, wasn't it? Because I know that, like, most of the people before Kabat-Zinn, well, there was one guy whose name I can't remember. It was like Bertrand, was also, whatever. Bertie. Let's call him Bertie. I can't remember his name. There was multiple people who were sort of like basically Buddhists who were just starting to bring these ideas into the West in more of a Buddhist context. And as far as I can tell, Kabat-Zinn was the first person to actually start formalizing it into what was then became MBSR.
Is John Kabat is he that Headspace guy?
Headspace? Aren't they like a prog band?
Yeah.
Headspace is an app.
Is he that app geezer? Because I've heard him say that, where he's like just like monetizing and breathing.
Yeah, a friend of mine has Headspace.
Oh, is that Kabat-Zinn? Is it Headspace?
It's based on the ideas that he's brought.
I'm pretty sure it isn't Kabat, because Kabat-Zinn, as far as I can tell, is a pretty sound guy, but mid-40s anyway. He was born.
Oh no, he's not that old. This guy's about 20, and he did a TED talk. He was like juggling fucking lemons. So
he's one of the first people to present it in a way that's accessible to the layman, which hadn't really been done a lot because mindfulness before that had been wrapped up, and there's a big problem in Buddhism of monasticism. The monks are the only people that get access to knowledge and stuff. I mean, it's a problem with all religions, but so it's part of borrowing ideas from the East into the West, and also this whole idea of
it's like in Doctor Strange, where he's not allowed to like read the secret books.
Yeah.
Until he gets really woke.
But that was also happening in the East at the same time. You had lay people getting access to texts, so it's the combination of both that brought mindfulness in. But so mindfulness in its more traditional context it has a number of translations, and you get this problem of what's called Orientalism, which is taking ideas from the East and using a sort of Western lexicon, Western ideas and typology and ways of approaching ideas. So example would be when we call Hinduism, we've already made a mistake there of really thinking that it's something homogenous, it's something singular.
Isotropic thing.
Exactly. And we project a lot of Judeo-Christian ideas onto those Eastern religions, and fundamentally they're probably totally different. We've inherited the wrong language for this kind of thing. But some of the very earliest translations are things like awareness.
So you mean they have a word for awareness which doesn't translate directly into our word for awareness?
Well, that was one of the things I came across when reading the Kabat-Zinn stuff, was actually he was saying a lot of the translations from stuff like the Buddhist Dharma and stuff like that weren't quite right, and people would often oversimplify the translation saying it is just awareness, but it's like the real translation is something a bit more like nuanced than just this word awareness, which is the closest you can probably get in one word. There's
also things like remembering. Memory comes up a lot, but there's other ones that are more existential, more to do with doing something rather than just thinking. But it's meant to be seen in the context of, because it's the seventh part of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is probably something that most people who are familiar with Buddhism will know. The crux of my point is that a lot of these Buddhist contexts are stripped away, and I find that really interesting. I mean, I don't really want to say whether that's good or bad. I have really mixed views on that. I've written a piece, you can find it on the website. I can't remember the fuck I wrote in it now, but yeah, that's basically...
Yeah. Well, I would say my main disagreement with this idea of it being an Orientalist thing, I would say it has separated itself from Buddhism, especially in a medical context. And it's also, and I think the most important thing that was sort of being missed so far with what mindfulness is and has become is it's a secular option. As far as like meditation and doing that sort of inward thinking and reflection is concerned, there's no other option that has this sort of structure to it that's sort of formalized. But yes, you could say one of the critiques of it is it's not fully formalized. And anyone can say, well, I practice mindfulness without really knowing what it is, etc. But at the same time, it's the only real thing out there which is sort of entered into the West, been sort of appropriated, but used in such a way that it is now a secular access to these Buddhist ideas. And it's sort of separated itself, especially with MBSR, which I should specify is mindful-based stress reduction, which was actually the medical technique that Kabat-Zinn came up with in the 70s when he was coming up with mindfulness and when he was trying to actually test a lot of these techniques with meditation and self-reflection and that sort of thing, and finding that they actually had medical uses. And you can read studies done with MBSR and stuff, and they do show that there is a more or less positive effect. I mean, it's not like...
Oh, it's immensely positive.
Well, I mean, like, there are a couple of things I would like to see in some of these studies before I'm like, okay, mindfulness, it's just like, is working, it's helping people reduce stress. And like one of the problems was there were two control groups, and this is one of the main studies I read, was one control group just continues on their normal medication and normal stress release stuff. And the other group, the one that actually practices mindfulness, does also continue on their medication, but they also do the mindfulness thing. But the problem is, like, the non-control group would go every day to like a psychiatrist or a mindfulness practitioner and talk to them. And I can't remember if this was in a group or not, but it's like...
Being in a group would have like that effect anyway. That's what it would do.
Exactly, yeah. If you're being told to go somewhere and talk to, even if it's not in a group, even if it's just with a psychiatrist, already that's like a big thing that we know has a positive psychological effect on people. And I think the control group, there would need to be a third control group that were actually going and see a psychiatrist who was just talking about bollocks, or they just chatted for a while, because like, I think trying to get rid of that human interaction part of the equation, which I think can be a big stress reliever.
Yeah, well, one of the things I found when I did research it was the long-term effect. Surely there's a short-term, alleviation of suffering and stress, but in the long run, you're not alleviating the cause of that stress. In fact, interestingly enough, a lot of people have said that in the long run, especially when you start to get into how this has entered into like phone apps and like the structure of corporate business, how they have set mindfulness programs as sort of like stress valves for when they
instead of dealing with the problem, they go, here's a way you can deal with this, because the problem's not going to change. We're not going to sort out the problem at its source.
For $9.99 a month.
Yeah, for just $4.99, you too can give up all of your money.
So have you guys had any experience with mindfulness at all?
I mean, Sam, you've been actually doing meditation, which is a big part
you guys do yoga, don't you? Or is it just Sam?
I do a little bit of yoga, but it's mostly the meditation thing.
Yeah, I've done some yoga, but I bury it. It's like one of those things. I already feel my blush is coming, because it's like,
you're like, oh, you eat falafel, do you, as well?
What, you do yoga? You must wear like a shirt with a yak on it and drink piss. It's like I did it. So I started like about a year ago, when there was this like, I went to a bare stressful job, which is why I think it's a bit bad that it's being used as like a way to like leech the like psychosis and like anxiety out of your brain, because it's being used as like a sort of a cheap
sorry, that was a loud chair noise right there.
Get comfortable there. It's just being used as like a really cheap sort of easy kind of medication almost.
Yeah.
We just go, oh yeah, we'll just take 10 minutes out and think about stuff, or don't think about anything, but I think mindfulness is good because it's like a nice back door to meditation. So meditation is really good for you.
Yeah, well, and as an extension of that, a back door to Buddhism itself.
See, I don't know, because I don't know much about Buddhism as like a religion, but it's like I literally know that tiny little like,
because mindfulness is devoid of all the metaphysical stuff that you end up getting attached to with Buddhism.
So is Buddhism.
But mindfulness is not Buddhism, so that's the point. It's like, you know, if you don't end up in having to attach yourself to all the metaphysical stuff, if you're just sticking with mindfulness.
So what's the metaphysical stuff?
Belief in gods and things. I mean, but Buddhism has gods, but they're more metaphorical. Like the Buddha speaks to a god during his enlightenment. He's tempted by devils and things. But I mean, that you can just take that figuratively. There's attempts to really secularize Buddhism, which is people like Stephen Batchelor. But I mean, I don't think Buddhism gets off the hook completely with, you know, not being a religion, just being like a secular philosophy.
Because that's the way I've always thought about it. I've never really thought about it as, Links have never really like delved into too much. But I've always thought of it as like almost like a secular practice, like a way to sort of view the world. Yeah,
and I'd say it's if it's not non-religious, it's definitely the least religious of all the religions. It's the most secular, if that makes any kind of sense.
What about Confucianism?
Yeah, similar thing, I guess. I've never studied it.
Yeah, no, I don't know very much about Buddhism at all, to be honest. But it's like, I mean, from what I was reading, I think that was one of the big points for me was, this, I mean, you can call it Orientalism, but I think at this point, especially since mindfulness has been in the West for such a long time now, and it's become a sort of thing, I do think it does, you know, it does acknowledge its Buddhist roots, but it really is like a separate thing now.
Well, I don't know if it does.
Well, Kabat-Zinn does.
Sure, yeah, but
But he was like first wave though, wasn't it? So
yeah.
I guess as it gets over here, the longer it gets over here,
that's true.
The more it's going to sort of distance itself from its original point of origin.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first wave stuff was, for all intents and purposes, basically Buddhist. It was rooted in all these greater contexts as well. Like, mindfulness is supposed to be, because the actual translation of mindfulness is sati, but then there's samasati, which means right mindfulness. So there's a right way and a wrong way. Machisati is the wrong way.
So what's the wrong way then?
Adding right and wrong kind of shows that there's an ethical context to mindfulness. It's not just something you do to help you relax.
So is that like a right way to practice it, or like a right way to use it?
Kind of both, because like Buddhism is sort of holistically existential. It's like a way you live your life and a way you approach life. So all these practices like yoga and meditation in any Eastern religion tends to have a wider context of why it's being done in the first place, because there are ideas like kleshas which go with it, which mean they're basically desires, which are bad in Buddhism, because desiring anything is fucking wrong in Buddhism. Not that I agree with it, but it does work.
Saying all desires are bad, because then like, what if you desire your head not to be messed up? So therefore you use mindfulness as a way to do that. Surely wanting to have, because the way I see mindfulness being used at the moment is like a way to like make your, maybe this is just me projecting onto it, but it's a way to like get your head right so you can more efficiently work. It's like the way that's what it's become. That's the way. It's like, are you stressed out from doing your like meaningless job? Well, try thinking about your breath for 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you'll be a better taxpayer.
But when it's in a Buddhist context, it's more about, well, what should you? Yeah, it takes that more existential look at, well, what should you want?
Well, this is the thing. It's like Kabat-Zinn, again, who's like my main source on this, says it's not really about this idea of giving away desire, giving up desire, because like the way he puts it, it's giving up clinging to certain things.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things where, you know, I didn't fully understand exactly the distinction.
Being more detached.
Is quite, but it's more about trying to listen to those aspects of yourself where you're just like, why am I thinking that? That's unnecessary, and this cloud of thoughts that you don't have to necessarily.
And I think the modern iterations don't really address that. At least some of them don't. I mean, I'm sure lots of them do, and I'm sure in a medical context it works just fine. But I think, so the reason I asked earlier if any of you guys had had any experience with mindfulness, I was going to give a couple of anecdotes. So, a friend of ours, George, when he was working in London, mega busy. Fucking, where did he work? Canary Wharf, yeah. Being a lab technician or whatever the fuck he was. The guy committed suicide because it was so stressful. And they gave everybody a book, the company, in response, on mindfulness and how to find happiness. I mean, that's victim blaming. Is it not?
Yeah, it seems like the right call, not to figure out what was causing that. I mean, there might be other factors we don't know, but it's
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, not to figure out what the problem is and then try and sort that out so it's like a nicer place to be, but give out a book that tells you how to.
Like, it's not until the root of any problem is addressed that you really start to, find a real solution to it.
Well, no, it's like the whole stupid analogy of like putting a band-aid over like a fucking wound.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, like what I was saying. It's also like there's another thing called like triage theory, which I know they use it in nutrition. It's like, what's the minimum your body needs nutrients wise to survive? What's the point where like if you don't get this nutrients, you start being ill?
Yeah,
and then we'll say that's like the recommended daily allowance. So you're treating it as like, what's the like minimum you can get away with? Which that seems like that's what that company's doing. And also it's a bit trendy, it's a bit groovy to be like, yo, also our company promotes mindfulness.
Yeah. So this Headspace app thing.
I need to look into this because I haven't come across it at all.
It's good. I used it like you get like 10 free days before you have to give your fucking money on a monthly.
Use one of those like temporary credit cards that has no money.
So a friend of mine says it's really useful. It's a friend of mine at work.
I can. My cynicism just kicks in when he's just like, shut your eyes and just, I want you to say 2 numbers and then a dash, another 2 numbers, another number. What's your mother's maiden name? It's just so fucking cynical, and it's just like all he's doing is
and your card details.
Yeah, it's like all it's saying is like, oh yeah, so just open your eyes. Like I memorize it because you just go, oh that's cool, I've learned everything this geezer has to say. Stare, soft focus, shut your eyes, feel your body, breathe in, count some numbers. You're back in the room.
So what is it doing differently to just going on YouTube and typing in meditation guide?
Just a guy talking to you.
So it's just like an audio clip.
To be fair, he has a very soothing voice. He's very, very relaxing.
Okay.
I was doing one the other day and I just felt my hand go towards my wallet and I was just like bringing it up.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine at work. She uses Headspace. She just keeps renewing the free trial. But yeah, I mean, there's mixed responses. I said, do you see any sort of credence in the ideas that I came across, which was that a lot of people just find the app really stressful because these fucking notifications going,
have you been mindful today?
Ping. Like you get home from work, it's like ping.
Are you stressed?
Well, the whole point of mindfulness is letting go, going, oh well, I better go and schedule my 10 minutes of mindfulness before
get out my BlackBerry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like the whole point is like relaxing and letting go. So you want to be able to do that in a way that it's like guided meditation's cool. It's good. It's quite fun to. Like that bit in Fight Club where they go to the spirit cave and they like meet the penguin and shit. It's nice to go on like a weird funny journey, but it's also like it's even better just to like try and let go. And if you're just listening to like your phone telling you to be mindful, I think that's just a bit.
Well, that's the thing. Because I don't think we've talked much about the actual practice of mindfulness, like what you actually are supposed to be doing and what
are you supposed to be doing? What's the?
Hang on, let me just get the Kabat-Zinn definition out and just unpack that.
So there's breathing techniques.
So it's, again, paying attention in a particular way. So what you're doing is you're just sitting there and paying attention to yourself and what you're feeling, and also non-judgmentally. And the non-judgmental bit's important because when you're sat there and all these thoughts are just kind of like, the analogy he uses is like bubbles boiling up from pan. It's like you just have loads of these random nebulous thoughts that are just constantly flying around. And if you just sit there and you just try to pay attention to the specific present, it doesn't mean don't think.
It just means don't grab onto a bubble.
Yeah,
you're supposed to sit. You're supposed to just like, and that was like the hardest things. Like I got told, there's one thing where a guy said like, oh yeah, so when you catch yourself thinking, yeah, obviously you're gonna be thinking because you're like fucking conscious, and it's like when you catch yourself thinking, just say thinking and then stop thinking, and then that's just like a terrible loop. So you go thinking. No, I'm thinking. Well, I just thought that I was thinking, and then it's like
this idea that meditation's about emptying your mind completely or not thinking. It's like you can't do that.
It's about like watching non-judgmentally.
Yes,
like
and it's about the idea of letting go of those of allowing these thoughts to just constantly cloud everything and just paying attention very specifically to yourself and where you are and what you are in that exact moment and how you feel and that sort of thing, and non-judgmentally, which is very important because it means paying attention to it and not going, oh, I feel like this, or making some kind of qualitative judgment on what you are. It's just existing specifically in that moment and letting go of those nebulous clouding thoughts. And like, I mean, that's not best explained by me in like a few minutes, but as far as a summary goes, that's as close as I can sort of get to trying to summarize a lot of what this practice is about.
Yeah.
It's super interesting what comes up. And it's like, that's the thing that I think is like, this is why, and I don't want to sound like that guy who's like, you know, cross-legged for 5 minutes and goes, oh, everyone, you must try this. But I've told people who I know who are like bare anxious, going like, okay, you need to, or just try this 10 minutes thinking. And it's like this, they don't want to because because you don't know what's going to come up. And it's like the first couple of months of doing it, it's like, I remember someone talking about it's like a exfoliation for your brain. You're like, some thoughts come up that you didn't think were going to be like a recurring theme, or like some ideas that you didn't really think, or like things you didn't know what on your mind would just keep reoccurring. And you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that bubble kept coming up.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but it allows you time to connect things as well, and actually think, and actually just like pay attention to where you actually are.
Well, it's similar to like CBT, where it's just like you get yourself sometimes in these negative mind loops where you go, that's a bad thing, I'm going to now think about it.
Yeah, I mean, so how would you say pre-Sam, before meditation, and post meditation Sam, what would you say were the biggest sort of changes to your mentality and everything?
It's not like I had like it's not like I grew like an extra 3 inches on my dick and like I could shoot lasers out my eyes.
Yeah.
But it's like,
well, that would be good.
But
you can sit cross-legged and float like a meter off the ground now.
Well, yeah, but it's like it was when I started doing this fucking job. It was just like cover supervisor, so I was just going into like new classes at school. And it was just bare stressful because I just literally got chucked into the job with like no training. So I was like, oh, cool. This is nice. Just going home, and then like, it's one of those things where like, I'm the sort of person that replays things a lot anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and you're thinking about both the past and the future.
Yeah, and you're going like, you know, what am I going to do tomorrow? What should I have done in that situation? Blah, 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 and you're rattling it around.
Meanwhile, you could be there like having a nice meal, sat in a warm house, and it's like you're
paying attention to something you've created, like a negative self.
Yeah, and most of your life, you realise that all you're doing is you're living in a different you're living in some problem that's in the future. You're living in some problem that was in the past. You're not living in the actual things that are like you need to be mindful about. You need to think about in the moment that are good. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's that's partly where some of the criticisms come that we'll get to in a minute, to do with like the idea of, well, sometimes you do need to be thinking about the future and thinking about how to work through problems that are coming up, and obviously that's a big thing. So like you can't just be constantly like, well, I'll just live in the present and
yeah, because that's nothing gets done. But it's like the thing that I find interesting it's like you're no longer sort of ruminating on things that you should have done or that you want to do. You're just focusing on things that are kind of like important and you kind of take for granted.
But yeah, it's very hard to be critical of these kinds of ideas, and I think rightly so, because they are. But I think there's a reason they're wrapped up in those metaphysical ideas within Buddhism and those wider contexts. I think you can't just rip them out and go, well, you know, they're useful. I think you at least need to consider why they were there in the first place and why those wider ideas
to an extent. But it's like by the same point, it's like, well, how does anything ever sort of end up being its own thing? It's like, if it is working and useful and seems to be popular and has been slowly adapting itself over time, over the last like 100 odd years, however long it's been in the West, probably not that long actually, because it was basically the 70s when mindfulness was really starting to be a thing on its own. But I do think it's like, sure, there's this whole idea of paying attention to the constructs of meaning of where a lot of these things come from, these ideas, like, when you start to throw out stuff like the Dharma and stuff like the Buddhist traditional roots and the ideas of the context in which these things were created, you start to throw out a lot of the, well, what do I do and what is my how better do I orient myself outside of just sitting down and being mindful now and again. And it's like, sure, there's that, but I do think like there's reasons why these things sort of do kind of explode and become part of the culture and become useful and become thing. And it's
there's clearly a use for it.
But the problem is like the use though, because it's then like after you do it and then you go, oh, that's worked. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I feel better now. And then you stop doing it. It should be like integrated as like a part of daily practice. Because I know that there was times where I was doing it for a good amount of time. And I'm like, oh, cool. My head feels decent now. And then it's like, people with antibiotics where they take like an antibiotic and then there's like a big pack of like 12 and they take 8 and they go, oh, do you know what? I'm actually better now. And then they stop at 8 and they go like, oh, I should finish the pack, but I feel fine and I won't do it. And then it's like that sort of like, it hasn't gone, and it's like still a thing that you need to keep doing.
So we found that certain practices within Buddhism have become useful when sort of taken from, like, C-sectioned out of Buddhism itself.
Yeah.
Why I use a C-section? Cesarean from Buddhism.
So it just like bursts out its stomach like a face hugger. Just like, it's mindfulness. I just see that bald guy with the app, his phone in his hand, just like bursting out of his stomach.
It's like, it's at what point are we still understanding the proper context in which something has come out of something? With mindfulness, it's like you said, it's shown to be useful when taken outside of Buddhism and just turned into this thing called MBSR and then used in like actual clinicians in clinical psychology and stuff like that, and it's useful and whatever. But it's like, you don't at the same time know exactly what you're losing. And like you said about the regiment of it, like when stuff are put in a religious context, there's a lot of regiment often, and there's a lot of like this idea of I must practice it, or it's part of my identity to practice this and whatever. Whereas if we're just using it like, oh, mindfulness, it's the tool I use to not be sad sometimes,
to drain the sadness out of my brain,
then it's improperly utilizing the technique.
I think it becomes fundamentally different when you're using it for an instrumental purpose. I think being aware of the present moment and things, those kinds of ideas have intrinsic value. But when you've got fucking corporations using it as stress.
Corporations, man.
that awkward pause before, like Midnight just going, the corporations, well, they're being all corporation-y.
Yeah. I was waiting for somebody to do it.
Money.
But yeah, when you have big businesses, when you have them, or on the part of the...
It's looking at Connor's copy of the Communist Manifesto.
We got that out on one of the old podcasts. But yeah, so say an employee wants to take up mindfulness to become a better employee. Using
they're using it as a tool to become a better.
That's why you need the ethical context to these kinds of practices, because otherwise it's just this weird tool used in this nihilistic universe.
So this is the thing. So when I read your essay, this to me is a more constructed criticism that's more about mindfulness itself, why that utility can be misused, at least in an ethical sense.
Yeah.
And that to me is a better form of criticism than just it gets used wrongly sometimes by companies, or it's like it's bad, it's inherently bad because companies or something. It's like, to me.
Yeah, I'm not like I'm not accusing like Western people of racism or whatever for like taking an Eastern idea and butchering it or whatever, because I don't think they're that sacred. I don't really believe in that kind of...
It's an idea.
Like the phrase like cultural appropriation now is now associated with an actual salence. It's now cultural appropriation is either inherently a bad thing or inherently a good thing. It's like it's just a phrase that is a thing that happens. It's not inherently good or inherently bad. There's no inherent...
Yeah, but it needs thought.
Well, surely it's good though. Surely cultural appropriation's good, because
it can be good. You
wouldn't take anything from another culture that's really terrible. You wouldn't be like, oh, cool, FGM's FGM's immoral and like not good. Let's get our FGM app out and we'll make that as like we'll take that element. You only take things that are useful.
Well, but this is the thing. It's like, I'm very sort of like, if I use Cuban beats in my music, that's technically cultural appropriation, but it's like
you're a racist.
But it's like at the same time, it's like I can see why, like, when you don't want to just lose the discussion of cultural appropriation is inherently fine, because it's like you want to continue having a discussion about whether qualitatively it's either good or bad. You don't want to just be going, oh well, cultural appropriation is fine, and I
don't know what I'm looking at. Jesus Christ!
So this picture for reference. Oh my god!
It was basically a woman in Scotland who covered her child in black paint and then put some like fake aviators on it, and then people were like, whoa, that's fucking weird. And then she went, whoa, no, it's not. It's just like I'm celebrating other people's culture. And I think that's the point. That's the point where we all go, okay, that's just fucking over the line.
Well, I think you have to take into account the intention. If she genuinely didn't mean that.
Well,
intent gets really muddy though.
See, of course it does.
I agree with your
Plus, you can't prove intent.
I agree with your point of intent's good, but then you look at the photo and you go, no intent, no intent. There was never a good thing behind that.
I'm not saying.
Like, I mean, she could she could honestly be so ignorant of how that's offensive or ill.
Yeah, you would have to.
But at the same time, you're just kind of like, well. talk sometimes about the difference between advocating for something in culture and advocating for something in law. Or at least trying to make some kind of law against bad. You have to define bad, and you have to define all these, and you can't do it. But in culture, I think it is important to have that discussion about whether something is in good taste or poor taste.
Yeah, everything needs that discussion. Everything needs a very critical approach. Yeah, I just generally want to be critical of this commodification of any idea, but particularly religious idea. Not that I believe in.
I think we can all agree
blasphemy.
that an app talking to, I don't know, I say that. I think I can agree with me that, like an app that, like, I've used it 4 or 5 times. It's literally, unless it's like there's some fucking paywall like advanced shit where after like week 10 you start levitating. It's just a geezer talking to you, go and breathe and think about your thoughts as cars. You wouldn't want to jump on top of a fucking car, would you? So don't do that with your thoughts.
And surf it
yeah,
all down the M5. Actually, fucking hell, I really want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. What about mindfulness, like being negative towards like setting goals? Like if you have a desire or
yeah, there was one thing that we probably, because we touched on that criticism of mindfulness as well, is the mentality of being very presentist. And I don't mean present, there is actually a scientific field of something called presentism, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the idea of actually very much focusing on living in the present and being very sort of like, so say like I've got something bad coming up and I'm really worried about it and I'm terrible. Like part of that natural stress process of releasing the adrenaline and being part of that, at least in a moderate form, in a non-crippling form, let's say, or like a 40, as Robert Sapolsky puts it, like turning on that response for a 40-year mortgage. It's like the same response you use from running away from a lion. It's like that is clearly bad, and then obviously mindfulness is useful then in terms of trying to get away from that. But at the same time, it's like if you in a week or so, if you've got a stressful exam coming up and you're stressed about it, part of that stress is going to push you to actually revise and actually do stuff.
Yeah, and it's finding that moderation, but.
Stress is very good. I think being stressed is bad.
Well, it's like roller coasters. You're
using stress, not letting stress dominate you.
You release adrenaline when you're on a roller. It's the same stress response you get but it's like the difference is one is short term and controlled, and it's also in moderation. The other one is just like this long term thing that does spiral into clinical conditions like depression and anxiety problems. And it's like that is the important difference. But yeah, at the same time, it's like you don't necessarily want to remove all stress and all worry about the future from your life, because
I think being stressed by like we were saying, like roller coasters, like exams, like quite big events that are out of the normal is like, yeah, that's good. That's going to get you to perform. But being stressed just by your job in general, which is something you have to go in and just do day after day, because it's like one of those things. It's like you were saying about the zebra and the lion. It's like going and then being like running from the lion and then going and spending 8 hours a day just standing around a lion, and then that's kind of what people do if they're like really stressed out by their job. Well, so maybe it's good in that sense as like
and I don't
like
think
a relief thing.
One other thing is I don't think that mindfulness is the correct response to, say, if there are multiple companies breaching laws or whatever, or you're in environments that are stressful. I know in war it's seen a lot of use.
Yes, yeah.
Chaplains and things are very keen to get soldiers using it.
In the dogmatic sense of sort of brainwashing people into being okay with their current situation and not complaining.
And that's like, I get that's another reason why it works in Mahayana and Theravada and stuff. And it's not really for soldiers like this. Yeah. But if there are these kinds of problems that are causing people to take on these schemes, engaging with the root of the problem is a better way to deal with it. And there's this sort of vein of thought that modern spirituality is actually making people apolitical. It's making people sort of just turn inwards and ride out all bad politics and things, making people just totally turn off from and disengage with that whole theatre. But I think that would technically be okay if everybody could do it. But it's not available to everybody.
I don't necessarily think.
Well, I don't think that either, really. But let's say people's response is, well, if it works, let's just ignore the problem. If we can ignore it, let's. And if there's no ill effect of that, but it's like not everybody has access to mindfulness. Not everybody can do mindfulness. Some people are just fucking constantly stressed, and it's fundamentally it's not the right action. And part of that is to use that stress and go, right, okay, I'm working 10-hour days. I'm not getting all my breaks and shit. I'm not just going to go into mindfulness. I'm going to go into the office and find any jobs and complain. And
you've got to confront, you have to confront the obstacle. Saying that being mindful of it, it's not actually. It's going to make you okay, but then it's going to make you exploit it.
Not that you can take on the whole world, and not that mindfulness won't help at the same time.
And also not that you might be the sort of person that is able to go into the office and say, because
sure.
The problem is you also have, in clinical psychology, you have the agreeability problem. Whereas people who don't ask for raises, etc., they are generally more agreeable, they're less disagreeable. And you have the same problem as someone who is very agreeable is going to sit in that office and be too afraid of the confrontation of going into, and then you have a problem which is not solved by mindfulness, it's solved by seeing a clinical psychologist or trying to find a way to practice being more disagreeable and trying to stick up for yourself a bit. Stuff like that can be really hard on people who are not naturally very disagreeable, because you don't want to have confrontation in your life.
It's because confrontation causes stress, and you might not have the mechanisms in place.
Exactly, and you don't know how to cope with that level of stress where it's so stressful confronting your boss or confronting someone or going to HR and talking about it. Because
it's like that old classic JP thing, though, isn't it? It's if you don't confront it, though, it's going to get worse. It's like that the littlest dragon story. It's a little tiny dragon. They're like, oh, that's pretty fucked up. We can make a little candle, and then it just grows, and then it just burns down the fucking village. It's much better to confront it when it's a tiny.
This is the problem with confrontation. It's you have to find the right way to confront it and learn about yourself before you can go, well, what is my strategy for confrontation? Am I too agreeable? Am I too afraid of conflict? Am I even able to do this, or do I have to leave? Can I even confront them? It's there's too many things about the scenario. It's if you, in some situations, maybe your only choice is to try and be more mindful because you have to ride out a wave because you're only there for 6 months or what. There's ways in which it's much more complicated and muddy than I think than just going, well, we need to confront the problem, because you can't always confront it.
I think it's like that Sun Tzu thing. You need to know yourself and the problem.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I think what the thing is mindfulness is very good at is it's allowing you to see yourself. And like you were saying earlier on, and the whole that capuchin monkey dude, I can't remember his fucking name. No.
John Kabat. He's trying to say John Kabat-Zinn.
John Kabat-Zinn.
He's saying capuchin monkey.
I decided that I would. I would just not attempt the name and then make a little thing on the side. But it's you're allowing yourself to see yourself, and like you were saying, non-judgmentally, you're allowing your thought patterns to come up, so you can go, okay, I'm doing that. That's a negative thought pattern, or I'm actually seeing myself in the present. I feel like I can't make that confrontation, but that's something that needs to happen. Instead of just going fucking negative mind loop and then never having that confrontation.
Speaking of kooky shit like that, I think there's another problem in general with...
Is it dickheads?
Yeah, dickheads.
Is it dickheads who hijack mindfulness? They made me not want to do it for about 3 years. And it's so useful. And then you get a guy come up to you and go, oh yeah, I once smoked spice in the Amazon. That put me off it for so long. And it's I've had this several times. I've had it when you recommended me a video to watch. And it's literally a video I was about to watch. And I'd put it in my watch later on thing. And then someone goes, oh yeah, you should check that out. And I go, oh. Well, there's one thing I'm not going to watch now for a long time for no reason. It's that
there's a really interesting dichotomy between ideas like mindfulness and ideas like yoga. They're both practices that have been similarly.
They're on the different ends, or
they've been aggregated and appropriated by the West for a sort of functional use, but
because they're good, they're useful, they're really good.
They are very useful, but yoga seems to have this slightly more. I'll use the word intrinsic.
I can use it if you want. Just do the hand waving.
Yeah, intrinsic.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, if you're still listening, Connor is waving his hands. We are screaming into the void.
So when you look on websites and things, you go on the NHS or whatever, they'll throw up fucking Hindu terms.
It's because it's cheap. Being mindful is very cheap. Sitting in a fucking room and thinking. It's like my mum's got this crazy fibromyalgia shit where it's her body is basically killing her, and they were like, well, have you thought about sitting in a room and staring at a white wall and thinking about your pain? It's that's a good idea, on paper, but also probably there's a point where you go, these are like a pharmaceutical alternative.
Yeah, what I mean is, with yoga, businesses and schemes and things, they're not afraid to use Sanskrit words and Hindu ideas. Whilst when it comes to mindfulness, for some reason, there's this weird, like, they just want to avoid any mention of Buddhism and Buddhist ideas.
I think that's part of the detachment from the metaphysical ideas. I think that's part of the process of it trying to devoid itself and become something in its own.
But I think I don't see why it should be different. It should be different for yoga. I think they both have fun.
When did yoga come into the West?
Well, at the same time as everything else.
I like to think that like literally nobody in the West stretched before the 1960s.
We're just walking about so compact,
just completely stiff.
That's the thing. Like, in its proper context, yoga isn't just stretching, and mindfulness isn't just stress reduction. In their proper,
but I think yoga's like tradition. It's like any martial thing. It's like Tai Chi. There's in the moves. There's a reason why people don't just go out and do fucking random moves. There's a certain like tradition in there. So you have certain moves and you call them their like proper name, and then if you want to, you can just be like, oh, this is Warrior 2. But it's like, so you have that, but then it's useful to give it the Sanskrit name because it adds like validity to it. It's like all these companies that are called, you know, like Argus Lighting. They'll go back to like ancient Greek names because it adds weight to it. Whereas like if you add a Buddhist name, if you add the only Buddhist name you could use that would actually hold any currency in the West is like Dalai Lama Mindfulness. We don't actually fucking know any Buddhist names. We wouldn't be able to separate them.
That's what's weird. Like, so if you want to bear in mind, you don't need any fucking qualifications or anything to start practicing.
Which is abusable, but that's like with anything, you know. It's like yoga,
like that guy in the TED talk juggling lemons.
Let's say I get a little office above a yoga shop, right? Above a laundry shop or whatever, right? Little office. I'm selling yoga. So if I'm selling yoga, 20
pounds, yoga,
20 yoga for
what is that, for like a kilogram of yoga or
for eight monies? So I'm selling yoga now. If my name's Keith,
I'm
not going to be selling any yoga. My name has to be
Keith Kabat-Zinn.
Yeah, I have to have a fancy foreign name, or I'm not going to be selling any of my yoga. If I want to sell mindfulness, I need a PhD on the wall, and I need a doctor. Yeah, because I genuinely think that. I think that mindfulness has this more clinical kind of context attached to it. The way we view it.
Because it's got the word mind in it. Because it's
MBSR is now a psychiatry technique, or it's the kinetic and clinical psychology. Yes, MBSR is actual technique that's used. So,
but then if there's like a technique, it's like you could say that yoga was like a part of like some weird sports science stuff. But it's like lower down.
I think they both have equally valid clinical uses. It's just interesting how they've sort of split away from each other. I think they're both as useful in the same context as each other.
I think they're quite. I think they are still quite tight. So it's like chances are, if you have someone who's quite into mindfulness, they are a lot more likely to be into yoga as well. And therefore, if you get someone who's into yoga, they are also a lot more likely to be into mindfulness, because it's part of that sort of mentality of like, I am actually going to look after myself. I'm not just going to be like, oh, what am I like? Eat another pie.
Self-discipline.
Yeah. You're like slightly self-destructive. It's like a sort of a weird spiritual discipline thing.
Well, it's like the analogy, I wanted to use was like when you go for a morning jog, you don't have to have a metaphysical construct to go with your morning jog, as in like God is watching me jog and that's part of my religious routine to go out and jog in the morning. But it's like at the same time,
I think it takes that place.
Yes, some people might require a metaphysical construct to persuade them to go out and jog. So it's like you have this difference where it's like you could probably use mindfulness in isolation without the metaphysical. You can use it and it might work for you and it might be good and it might be good. But it's like, yes, at the same time, it's like how much are we sort of, you know, how important is it to have the actual formality of the structure to be able to utilize it properly?
Do you see it as a formality? Because I'm on the fence. Like, so attaching metaphysics to practices, you think that's a formality?
It depends because I think it's a utility of the thing. So it's like often attaching metaphysics is a way to help to formalize the concept within the thing. So the way I'd put that is, so the way to best describe necessity to act is to formalize it in a metaphysical way, because we are not good enough at very complicated long-term things, because we're basically higher apes, it's easier to go, there's a guy in the sky watching you, so you better go do that, because if someone's watching, and that digs into primal parts of our brain, and that helps to, but it's obviously that's a massive simplification of metaphysical constructs of most religions, but that's the point, is like you have this separate side which can be useful, might not be, depends on the context, but it's obviously this is a very complicated thing to actually dig into.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, so
I think have we not done that, but just we replaced God with the future. So you go like, I'm going to do important things now, so I'm going to do yoga now, I'm going to eat well now, I'm going to work hard now, because the future will then reward me in it.
To an extent.
So we're thinking about, I'm not saying that our future has become our God, but we're just going like, our reward is in the future. That's like where we're putting things
so
now.
we've replaced
with the climb up, maybe a corporate ladder, maybe a social status ladder.
Yes, but the problem is that's much lower resolution, because then you don't have this. You don't dig into the primal idea of someone's watching you. Two, you don't get any ethics or anything. So it's like you could be an awful person otherwise, and you don't. And
but it doesn't matter, because your primary goal is.
It's like extreme utilitarianism. Yeah, no, I think the elements of that are definitely true. But yeah, so one of the things that I always got confused with, I would, when I was a new atheist type fucking, I
used to be. What changed? What are you now?
A post-new atheist.
Post. Oh my god! It begins here today. Post-atheism.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see. I'd call myself a humanist, but then I see a lot of things going on with the humanist society, and I think maybe not.
This is why mindfulness is good, because it just lets you be like a religion of yourself. You can just chill the fuck out.
But I used to say that a religious experience was essentially no different from a secular experience. Say if we were playing a gig or whatever, we'd have this like euphoria, and a lot of people would be like, "No, it's fundamentally different. Just by virtue of the metaphysical context, it fundamentally changes what you're experiencing on an experiential level." And I'd be like, "No. It's just a language difference. You're just adding false metaphysics onto human experience." And I genuinely don't know where I sit with that now, because I've never really been experienced in religion. I've never experienced the numinous.
Have you experienced superstition?
Oh, we used to do seances.
Well, I mean, like, but actually, not like tongue-in-cheek superstition. I mean, like, you legitimately would not do some certain.
When we were having those seances with the curries and everything every night, I genuinely believed in ghosts.
You can't even pretend that there's a serious seance when you've got the word curry in there. It's like you're like, oh, it was a serious. We would do it in a cynical, glib manner, but we did have a few lambooners.
No, we.
I'm not saying religion, superstition. Religion equals sign superstition. No. What I'm saying here is like, because there is obviously there's a degree of like, there's something similar in the sense that when you believe in something, you will act differently to if you try to rationalize through, because you can't rationalize perfectly through everything.
Do you think religions need to be superstitious?
Not. Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, it's basically built into the definition, which is the problem. So.
As opposed to what, like a religion based in logic and science.
Well, I'd say the Nazi regime is a religion.
So you think, yeah, because I really don't. I don't know much about like.
I think Hitler was either a Catholic or a pagan, some sort of weird pagan.
That's a weird pagan thing.
Yeah, he had a fascination with the occult and artifacts and things.
I know he was a big fan of like the fucking like Nordic races and shit like that, and he had like.
Well, I know that like on the other end of the extreme with communism, it was very like atheistic in a sense that it
was, but I think
there's a big movement around there, and it's like
it was very
once you go that people don't have a soul and there's no afterlife and there's no morals, it allows you to get away with a lot of shit because you go, oh cool, there's no punishment.
Well, I also think that a lot of the farmers and shit that would have been dragged into this would have been Catholics and things, or Orthodox, sorry. And they would have been deeply orthodox, and they would have probably needed that kind of.
It's like the donkey in Animal Farm. He just gets on with it and works and basically dies working. I don't know if you remember.
I haven't actually read.
The donkey just like after the pigs take over, and he's just the one that he just gets on with it.
He keeps going.
He just keeps going until he actually dies of exhaustion. And that was sort of like a lot of these sort of very orthodox farmers and things. It was sort of, this idea that there was this subsect of people that just tried to get on with it and do the best they could and just ended up killing themselves working basically.
Oh yeah, that's us.
I don't think people come to religion because they believe that they're swayed by metaphysics. You can never go up to a person and give someone a logical argument for God, and then they go, oh, logic with I was an atheist. I guess you've given me the evidence. I'll be a god. I'll be a god believer.
I'll be a god. he just like fucking Dr. Manhattan. He just starts levitating. It's like I was holding myself back all the time. That's actually what happened after my first 10 minutes of mindfulness. I started levitating and I grew a 9-inch fucking CGI dick.
Built a giant city on Mars.
Yeah, literally. And then I came to from sniffing the glue, and then realised I just shouted in my hands and made a pot out of it. I just sat there just moulding my shit into a pot.
But yeah, I think
dragging it back to the mountain.
Don't know if I can now.
Imagine using your oven as an auger with shit. What will that smell like?
Oh, not great, mate. You'd have to eat a lot of clay. You have to eat a lot of clay, and your body would it would not be comfortable, but you could probably process it.
We're thinking about how to do this viably now, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
How can we get away with this?
We could be like, oh my god, Human produced mindful clay.
Yeah.
And then people could just, what we could do.
Well, they sell that shit. I went to a Hindu temple in Neasden, and they were fucking... They're just selling shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like shit shampoo, shit soap, shit.
Have you seen those Padre Pio Catholic shops where they're selling, like tears of Moses for like whatever, and they just send like a little bottle, and they're just like, oh yeah, cool, that's like 20 quid. It's a piece of the true cross.
Speaking of relics and shit, right? So
you intrigue me.
Dialectical materialism. So like Nazis, fucking Stalin. Who's the other one? Mussolini. All these fucking dictators. The reason I'd Pol Pot. The reason I'd say they're fucking How many more dictators can we name?
Just name them.
Gaddafi,
Putin,
yeah.
Xi Jinping,
Theresa May.
Oh my god, I was waiting for it. I wasn't going to be the first one to say Trump and then just ruin it.
But like, if you think of all the things that sociologically, maybe not metaphysically, but sociologically that religion has, they have all those things. They have relics, they have mythology, they have,
mysticism,
a historiographical idea of their own culture. Do you know what that means? Because I don't.
Historiographical.
I learnt this in first year.
Is that like Tony Robinson with an XY axis?
A historiography is a relationship with one's own history.
Yeah.
So they have this relationship with their own history. I could have just said history, basically. But like they have this, all the same things we look for in religion. The collective worship, collectivism in general, that whole approach to it, and the polarized worldviews, the right and wrong. The right and wrongs are still there. The ethics are still there.
Yeah, with diets, like people have taken religion, they've put it in diets. So you get like vegans who've turned their diet into a religion.
A whole ethical system.
Yeah, exactly. And you create like a group identity. I'm not dissing vegans because they will burn my house down. But it's, after all the millions who listen to this will attack me.
It's all right. Their bones are brittle.
Yeah, oh my god, there was this geezer at work, and he was like, "Oh yeah, my daughter." He was talking about how his daughter was like a vegan, and then like 4 days later, they're like, "Oh yeah, she got rushed to hospital. They looked at her blood." No fucking iron in it. I was like, yeah, she needs a steak. Like, it's not good, dude.
Oh, that's horrible. That's not good.
It's not good.
One of the humanists, when I used to run the Herefordshire Humanists, one of them just fucking stormed out because a vegan came in and started talking about veganism, and the guy was just like, you bloody stupid idiot, not eating meat.
Eat a pie, cunt.
And just ran away.
Eat a pie.
So angry.
Yeah, I'm on that geezer's side, to be honest. It's like, I wouldn't be able to live without steak.
I just bought a hedgehog house. That makes me slightly environmentally friendly.
You trying to catch a hedgehog that you can eat it?
Well, I just bought a hedgehog house, but I also just bought a giant ring of black pudding. So it's like cancels it out.
It's like karmic balance. It's like Tough and his fucking scales are just. Why don't we just like all of our religion just shit? Like, here's the point: is like, why don't we just start worshipping Greek religions? Because they're fucking cool. They're so fucking cool. And it's like they accept that like gods are just like humans, where they're just like terrible people who make terrible fucking mistakes.
They're characters, aren't they? They're almost like representations of various parts of the psyche, aren't
That's
they?
exactly what they are. So you got like Eros, who's like the fucking god of like sexual assault. And it's like all of these things, and it's like, why don't we do that? Because like our religions are so boring that we went, I'd rather believe nothing than our religion. I'd rather believe in like a scientific based understanding of the world.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually exactly why they've become boring, because of empiricism, because of science, we've ended up with trying to gerrymander. A lot of Christianity has to gerrymander around scientific progress. So you end up with this more and more boring. Instead of having Zeus like makes lightning bolts, go, well, lightning bolts have to have a difference in charge between the ground and the sky.
But the Greeks didn't actually fucking believe that Zeus was throwing lightning bolts.
Well,
it was just cool for them to go, okay, well, let's pretend that there's this guy who throws lightning bolts.
It was all poetic.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like, because they're just going, let's give homage to these like parts of our own psyche, which we will represent in these characters.
But that's the problem. I think modern people can't do that unless it's Avengers, in which case we're like, oh, that's fine. Go and watch the Avengers.
Is that our myth? I was talking to some fucking year nines about like Norse myth, and I was saying like, is that our myth? Is Captain America like our version of that? If so, what you've done is you've just like turned ethics into like the fucking most soulless product we can.
I like Marvel.
I just made like no. Come on, if you're talking about fucking the Headspace app being a bastardization of like Buddhism, you've got to.
Marvel's the only one I let them get away with. The DC,
well, and then they make Thanos like basically this sort of utilitarian ethic, but it's so shallow and poorly. It's still really poorly thought. It's like you could have done something a bit better.
Mate, Doctor Strange grew 8 arms and turned Thanos' thunderbolts into butterflies. That's cool.
He could give you a mad wank. There's 8 arms.
Before the Enlightenment, we had a very different conceptual idea of what religions were. Like we had a more poetic understanding of truth.
Yeah, metaphorical understanding of truth. Yeah.
But since we inherited the language of the Enlightenment and evidence and logic, this is why creationism didn't exist. That not so much creationism, because obviously creationism was in reaction to evolution, but the language that creationism uses about truth, that kind of language with truth and religion didn't exist beforehand. If you'd have gone back to one of the apostles and said, is God metaphysically true? They'd, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's why let's see, that was my like beef. I always thought like, but back when I was like 14 years old, and you were like, oh, well, Adam and Eve can't be related, because then we'd like all be like genetically messed up. It's like, I didn't realize until like, a couple of years ago, it's like, yeah, if you think about that as like a primitive rubbish understanding of like scientific reality, you're just barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, this is why I stopped believing in new atheism, and I say believing because it was a belief system.
It became dogmatic in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly thought religious people were fucking stupid for a good year.
And it's like some people are, but some atheists are as well. Like it's like there's dumb atheists, there's dumb religious people, there's dumb.
Is there any group funnier to troll though than the atheists?
The new atheists are quite triggerable.
Absolutely not. You say anything to do with God, and it'll be you're fucking. Oh, you believe in sky fairies? It's like straw manning and just fucking fallacies all over the place. But yeah, so that's why I don't think religion really relies on those superstitious elements or whatever, because I think they're poetic approaches to truth anyway. What matters is action, which is why I think humanists are really weird, because all they've done is taken Christian ideas and removed the metaphysics. They're living as Christian. They're two sides of the same coin. It's just one has metaphysics, one doesn't.
And this is the thing: is they use words like, well, part of our thing is to be good to one another. It's like, well, you can't just say let's be good to one another.
What does that mean?
Exactly. You have to do at least. You have to at least do some storytelling, some unpacking. You have to go, well, our culture is based around these principles. You have to have some sort of structure. You don't have to. You can't do that scientifically, which is the problem, because you can't do that empirically.
And if you don't, then you're living in some weird like George Lucas Attack of the Clones sexless reality. You've got like no fucking. You've got no myth, no like mystery, nothing to base these good things on.
Ethics is too sophisticated to put down a specific rule set. You can't. It's like, this is the
that would be moralism
of utilitarianism, that sort of thing, where you have this problem with trying to prescribe from a logical basis, or at least, from a rational basis, trying to get an axiomatic ethical truth, it gets far too, even if theoretically this was a possible thing, which we have no idea whether it is, you still have this problem that the complexity level gets so big so quickly that you have to, at the end of the day, you have to act. Like I said, it's action that's important. It's not, you also have to have these frameworks in place to be able to act.
Yeah, well, I think very few atheists realise that, and that's...
I do think you need some, leaps of faith to be able to orient yourself and act, but that doesn't make me religious. I'm not, I say I'm not a religious person, but I also, I normally say atheist, but I'm kind of getting uncomfortable with that label, because when you say atheist,
it's picked up so much flack.
It's picked up this idea that, that means you're anti-religious, or you don't think that you think believe only in science.
I say non-religious, that's fine. If I say atheist, people go, what?
Because I think the problem with atheists is, for some reason, atheism has picked up this idea that you really spitefully, not only do you not, like, it's fine if you don't want to believe, but like the thing with atheism is it's picked up this stigma of you would like to also take away someone else's belief structure. So you go to your fucking YouTube comment section and you go, Dawkins devours the planet. Type in like
using logic in caps.
Do you mean it's like I don't believe in God, but if someone came up to me and went, I believe in Catholicism, I'd be like, cool. I wouldn't go, oh, well, you, sir, you're worshipping a dead fucking prophet, you are. And
I would say that with fundamentalists and creationists.
But that's different though, because that's an extreme sect almost.
Yeah, that's the problem. It doesn't necessarily come packaged with, because like when you say I am religious, that could mean so many things.
Like we were saying about the Christians who don't actually believe in like a celestial being of God. They believe in like humanity. It's like humanism.
I do fundamentally set myself apart from, in opposition to anybody who believes in objective truth, whether it's a fucking objective truth, prescriptive truth. Then something that's being prescribed to other people. So when there's a street preacher with a handlebar mustache on the street the other day.
Why does he have to have? Oh, okay, go on.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a character you created, but it's an actual person.
Is this like an anti-realist position, or is this like a relativist position, or is this like a? Are we talking specifically about something else? Yeah, because I'm a bit. The minute you say non-objective truth, I'm immediately getting the epistemic shoes on, and I'm sort of going, okay, are we talking about realism now?
This guy said that we should believe in Christianity because it's true.
Oh, case closed, boys. Yeah. This is true.
We've gone way off topic from, but that fundamentally is what I have a problem with, and that goes for fascists, new atheists.
Yeah, just to make sure people don't misinterpret, I get it now. So it's the idea of prescribing things that you think are objectively true on other people, despite the doubt factors of those.
More specifically, moral truths, really.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's just,
moralists. Yeah.
Even if you think like there is moral realism, even if you do think there are like objective universal moral truths, there's still enough doubt that it doesn't make sense to go around saying, well, you're object. It doesn't necessarily. Yeah, you can't necessarily go around heavily. Although I do think that advocating for certain moral principles is good. Yes, it's healthy. But like you said, a prescriptive.
It's just getting rid of dogmatism.
Yeah.
That's the same. It's the same thing that we were talking about with mindfulness, where you kind of want to say to people like, "Oh yeah, you might be happy if you do like, or happy's bullshit, but you might be helped by having like 10 minutes thinking about or concentrating on like the present, but you don't want to go around and like attack people and force them to concentrate on the present."